start recording. Thank you very much. And let's get started. So this is the webinar outline. I'll give a quick introduction to the Institute of Clinical Trials and Methodology. This is where the master's is located. Even though it's an online master's, it's given by actual people, and we work at the Institute of Clinical Trials and Methodology. The second section, I will give you an introduction to the structure and the content of the MSc with a selection of topics, i.e. what you will be learning. You're probably interested in this. Andy will present how we teach, the organization of teaching, and the fourth section is a Q&A. But as I said before, feel free to interrupt in the middle of the webinar if you are really curious or if you have a burning question at that point. So the Institute of Clinical Trials and Methodology. First, I'll introduce myself. I am head of statistics at the Comprehensive Clinical Trials Unit. My interest from a methodological perspective, if you want, in clinical trials is the design and analysis of early stage trials. And I've got a series of publications in this field. In terms of work experience, I started working at IC2, Imperial Clinical Trials Unit, whilst I was a PhD student at Imperial. I then went to work at the Cancer Trial Center at UCL. And since 2019, I've been with the Comprehensive Clinical Trials Unit. Education-wise, I've got an MSc in Medical Statistics from UCL, actually, from the same university, an MRes in Biomedical Research from Imperial, and a PhD in Biostats from Imperial. The Institute is a center of excellence for clinical trials, but also for meta-analysis, for epidemiological studies, and for methodological research. And we have trials in a variety of disease areas, from infections to cognitive health, to primary care, neuroscience, CVD, obstetrics, Parkinson's, neonates. We really cover a wide range of diseases. From a trials perspective, we interact on a daily basis with our physician colleagues. We develop grant applications with them. So it's an extremely multicultural and multidisciplinary environment. And we have expertise from early to late phase clinical trials. I am specializing in early phase, so phase 1 and phase 2 clinical trials, for example, and we've got colleagues who have specialized and who have contributed massively to the methodology of late phase trials. You may have heard of multi-arm, multi-stage trials, for example. We're part of the Faculty of Population Health Sciences. The Institute is made of 4 trials units. As I said, I work at the Comprehensive Clinical Trials Units. There are 3 other trials units part of the Institute. The MRC Clinical Trials Unit at UCL, the CR UK Cancer Trials Unit, and then the Primen Trials Unit, where they do interventions in primary care. And you can find out more, obviously, about the Institute on this link. And I'm sure that because you have registered for this, you probably have already looked at our web pages. Structure and content of the MSc now. And what are the key features of this MSc? You will be taught by lecturers from all 4 trials units and some lecturers from the UCL Medical Statistics group. You'll be taught cutting-edge statistical methodology taught by the authors themselves. The teaching at UCL at master's level is based on research. So the teaching will be based on our recent publications. I will be teaching early phase based on my recent publications of the last 3 to 4 years, for example. I've said before, but this is an important point, the teaching is based on real-life examples from the Institute, and we are gonna use our own trials, including trials in CVD, including trials in ophthalmology, COVID-19, vaccine trials, etc. I've just mentioned this, but I will repeat and perhaps give more color to this. One of the main pillars, if you want, of UCL is to be a global leader in the integration of research and education. So at the Institute, we publish constantly in the world's best journal. And this is the way we intend to teach you. We intend to teach you based on our own research. We integrate our research and our education. We will ask you to read some methodological papers or some clinical trial papers in preparation for some of the live lectures. Remember, this is an online MSc, so some of the lectures, most of the lectures are actually asynchronous in the sense, Andy will cover this in more detail, but they are asynchronous in the sense that you will watch pre-recorded lectures. But when you come to the live lectures, where we will do the practicals, where we will provide you with some recaps, etc., we will also discuss real-life example from our own publications. We are a very large group of academic statisticians in the UK. We are more than 100 over the 4 trials units. This is how the master's is organized. In term 1, you will take the Introduction to Clinical Trials Design and Statistical Analysis module. And this is a module that runs for the first 10 weeks, from week 1 to 5 to week 6 to 10. And then on Thursdays, the light blue boxes are the modules for the Statistics for Clinical Trials MSc. And we've got statistical coding for you and statistical models. Again, this will last for the whole of the first term. So effectively, there are 3 modules for term 1. Introduction to Clinical Trial Design and Statistical Analysis. This module is a joint module between the Clinical Trials MSc and the Stats for Clinical Trials MSc. And then we've got the 2 stat-specific modules, statistical coding and statistical models. In term 2, we've got further trial design and analysis, which is also a joint module between clinical trials and stats in clinical trials. And then we've got the stat-specific modules, clinical trial statistics in weeks 1 to 5 of term 2. Effectively, this is now. It's between January and mid-February, weeks 1 to 5 of term 2. And then after the reading week, effectively end of February and March, we've got health economics and meta-analysis. In term 3 is the master's project. I'm now going to just mention a couple of our recent publications, a selection of our recent publications. We've got here a publication with Kashfia Chowdhury, which is the second author on this paper, for a study in keratoconus, which is a condition, an ophthalmology condition. And this is a good example of the variety of projects that we are involved with and that we can teach you clinical trials and statistics for clinical trials on. This is one of my papers. It's a paper about how to conduct dose-finding trials in virology. Most of the research for dose-finding trials has been done in cancer, in oncology, but it's important to obviously not neglect all of the other disease areas where dose-finding might be important. So this is an important publication that you will hear more about if you join the masters. Here is a meta-analysis by the meta-analysis group between IL-6 antagonist and mortality for patients hospitalized for COVID-19. So this changed actually clinical practice just by reviewing the evidence at a meta-analysis level of all IL-6 antagonists that were given for patients in ICUs. Now I'm going to cover a quick selection of topics from the MSc before Andy is going to present to you how we teach. But hopefully this will be exciting for you. You will actually have an overview of the sort of topics we cover. This presentation is not statistical. This is a webinar. We will present and introduce and teach you these topics in a very statistical manner. So one of the things we look at are advanced designs. This is an example of a biomarker stratified design in cancer. So this is a study called Focus 4 in metastatic colorectal cancer. And as you can see at the top, there is a biomarker analysis during the first 12 to 16 weeks after the diagnostic biopsy for the trial. And depending on the results of the biomarker analysis, patients enter arms A, B, C, D, or N of the trial, depending on their mutations. Arm C, for example, is for RAS mutant. Arm A is for BRAF mutant. And depending on the arm, a different agent is investigated. As you can see, novel agent 1 is for BRAF patients, whilst novel agent 3 is for RAS patients. So this is an example of an advanced design, biomarker stratified, and this design has lots of implications on the sample size and the statistical analysis at the end. And this is one of the topics that we cover. We'll obviously cover sample size calculation. This is a very simple example for a binary outcome. We've got the variance of the endpoint, which is a function of the proportions in each group. And I'm talking about proportions of patients responding, for example, or proportion of patients reaching a certain reduction in their blood pressure or their viral load, right? So these are P1s and P2s. We've got the difference between the two treatments at the denominator of this formula, pi1 minus pi2. We square it, and then we've got a function of the significance level and the power of the study. We will be covering this in more detail, and we will explain to you how these formulas are developed. So we will dive deep in the engine. We'll talk about estimation, obviously, and confidence intervals. Here are different samples of different size of a certain population of height, and we will talk about how we derive confidence intervals, their lengths, and how many of these confidence intervals include the true effect, depending on the length of the confidence interval that we choose. We'll talk about the most important statistical tests. This is just an example. We are here covering the famous chi-square test, in which we take the differences between the observed values in the 2x2 table of a clinical trial if we've got a binary endpoint, and the expected values if the columns and the rows were not associated. We square that, we divide that by the expected values, and this is the value of the chi-square. Then we check to what extent this value is a low or a high percentile of the chi-square distribution. Imagine that you have got a study where mortality is the primary endpoint, and the two treatments of interest are aspirin, or the only treatment of interest is aspirin. The other arm is a placebo of aspirin. And we've got 30 people who died in both arms. The sample size is balanced at 100 per arm. There is obviously no association whatsoever between mortality status and which arm of the trial the participants were in. We'll cover regression models. This is the logistic regression, in which we model the log of the odds of an endpoint as a function of a covariate. The covariate is X. This model is a linear model in the sense that we do not have any square terms, we do not have any splines, etc. So we start with the basics, and then we will explain some more sophisticated models, including mixed models for clinical trials. We also cover survival models in detail. We'll talk about some advanced analysis methods. This is one of my papers. I talk about the life expectancy difference and the life expectancy ratio, which are measures you can use when the non-proportional hazard, when the proportional hazard assumption is not respected in a given clinical trial survival data set. This is a visual representation of the life expectancy difference, which is the area between the two survival curves. And you will learn much more about that during the MSc. So I'm gonna stop sharing now, and Andy will share his screen so that he can present section 3 organization.
Hiya, hopefully you can see that. So just to briefly introduce myself, my name's Andy Embleton, and like Hakim, I work as a medical statistician at the CCTU, the Comprehensive Clinical Trials Unit, but I have also worked in one of the other 4 clinical trials units, the MSc Clinical Trials Unit, and I did my PhD within the institute. So that's me, and so I'm just going to go through briefly the organization of teaching on our course. So effectively, you may have already read online, but there are a few options available to you as to how you study and what the award is that you get at the end. And so we've got a kind of quite a modular and flexible program, we like to think. And so this can either be conducted, you can either complete it with us over 1 year in a kind of traditional way where you sit all of the modules and complete everything within a year, or the other option is to do it over 2 years part-time. And I'll go into the detail of that in a second, but that option is there available to you with a bit of flexibility. And this is one of the advantages I feel of it being online. this affords us a bit more flexibility in that respect. And so, as I said, the two outcomes available to you are either an MSc or a PG dip. And so the only real difference between that is both of them are 120 taught credits. And so that's basically saying you do all of the taught modules. But to get the MSc award, you will do a 60 credit or so, quite a large, it's worth kind of 50% of all the taught material, quite a large independent research projects during the third term. And when I say independent, I don't mean completely on your own. Obviously, you'll have supervisors from within the institute, and these supervisors will be very engaged with your project because they will have either proposed it themselves or worked it up with you. But this is to try and prepare you for further independent research. And so if you do that, that is the MSc route. And so just to go back to the options available to you for kind of part-time study. So as I said, full-time, you'll complete all the modules all in the first year. And so as Hakim showed you in the diagram, these are what we do is we record material and prepare material. And then these are made available online on, say, the Tuesday. And the expectation is for you to go through the recorded material, go through any exercises or reading, which is set by the tutors that week. And then we come to like a live online class, either on the Tuesday or the Thursday, whichever one you're on. And that's where you have opportunity to typically ask questions and interact with the material that the tutors have provided for you. And then the other option is part-time. As I said, you do all the modules over 2 years. And so what will happen is that you'll either join a Tuesday module or a Thursday module. And there is some restrictions in that some modules are kind of need others as a prerequisite, but generally you get a bit of flexibility as to how you choose to put the modules together. And so, yeah, just to highlight, really, this is fully online. And so what do we mean by this? Everything is delivered and administered using the internet. So the massive advantage is that you can be anywhere, really, as long as you have an internet connection, and you don't have to be in London physically with us to do this. And so as hopefully you got from what I was saying, that obviously we want you to join the live sessions, which are typically kind of 2-3 hours in that ballpark. But the stuff which is put online, the resources and everything online, as I've said here, the engagement with staff and students, this can all be done online at a time which is suitable to you. But as I've written here, all interactions are done online. So this includes assessment, submission, and the like is done online. And so there are obviously positives and negatives to this, but on balance, we feel that the benefits outweigh the negatives. And so we have had in the previous years and in the last year, or the first year, the Stats MSc, we've had quite a different profile of students joining us, people that maybe necessarily wouldn't have been able to take a year out of, say, a job or a year out to come to London. And so we feel it's been made it much more accessible to different potential students. And so we've said we find it's much more convenient for the students because they can look at this material whenever it suits them. It's more flexible around their job or childcare or any other caring responsibilities they have. There's increased interaction, and this can appear a little bit counterintuitive to start with, but we find we actually have more interaction online, and we try to encourage this interaction as much as possible. I think it's because everyone's on the same level, and so everyone is remote, everyone is online. So I feel like everyone is at a similar baseline, whereas maybe when people are in person, kind of people's natural inclination to engage or not comes out more, whereas online they kind of have to, really. And so we feel that it works quite well. And so we've had increased interaction with potentially enhanced learners, we hope. And so you get the opportunity also to develop technical skills by using different technologies online. So what is it like to study with us at the Institute? So this is broken down into two parts, as I said, that is slightly alien, at least to me, words, but they're asynchronous and synchronous. So basically, the asynchronous is these resources and activities which are accessed online before the live session on an individual basis whenever suits you, the day before, the week before, in the evening and the like. And then the synchronous, which is when we all come together, so the students and us, the module leads and the lecture from that week, and we interact in various different ways and participate in learning in real time. So I think you probably grasped this from Hakim's diagram, but the modules are organized into weeks of study. And then, yeah, the asynchronous is each week we post on Moodle, or we can advance, and we'll guide you through this as to what is expected of you. But typically it's to watch the lectures and do any exercises that were set. And then the live session, as I said, approximately 2, 3, 4 hours. This varies according to the module and the style of what's being delivered. But it's in that region, and you will be told that well in advance. It's very easy to join. We haven't had problems with anyone joining Zoom. The Zoom link is on Moodle, or this platform for delivery for UCL. It's just a website effectively. And we would like you to attend as many as possible of those. But sometimes things get in the way, and we completely understand that. But generally, we would expect you to join the live sessions, and we would love you. It kind of depends on the group and the group dynamic, but it's so much better if the cameras are on, and we find that is fairly common. So yeah, that was me. Do we have any questions? Hakim, did you want to take back over or anything?
Yes, no, you can stay with your slides, indeed. That's great. We are at the end of the webinar at this point, at least in terms of speaking to you, and it's the Q&A, questions and answers. So have you got any questions? You can unmute and ask your question, or you can ask your questions in the chat. Perhaps I'm going to start with a question, actually. What attracts you to the statistics for clinical trial MSc? And there is a question around how much background statistical knowledge is expected. So you will probably have seen that in the entry requirements, we require students with previous education in a quantitative discipline, ideally. We also recruit medical students who have evidence that they have also taken some quantitative modules before, but it's assessed on a case-by-case basis. Typically, students coming from a background in statistics, or a background in psychology, or a background in other disciplines where there are statistics modules in the undergrad are accepted. What is your background? Biomedical sciences BSc. So you will be very well placed to understand the reasons why some treatments are tested in various disease areas. I'm sure that you've done quite a bit of statistics in your BSc. So we would definitely consider your application. I think in terms of entry requirements, given that biomedical sciences has quantitative modules, correct me if I'm wrong, and the fact that it is extremely relevant to clinical trials, we would definitely consider your application for statistics for clinical trials. I'm not going to lie though, it's going to be a step change for you in terms of quantitative education. So the first 3 months or so will be tough, but I'm positive that that you can do this. That's an excellent question also. What would be the main difference between the MSc Stats in clinical trials and the MSc Clinical Trials? So the MSc Statistics for clinical trials, it's about statistics. So even though you've seen that there are two modules that are joined between the two programs, the other modules are statistics specific. At the end of the Stats MSc, you will effectively be a statistician. You will be able to apply for jobs in clinical trials units as statisticians, and you have a career as trial statistician in front of you. The MSc Clinical Trials is a bit more varied. It's less focused on statistics. And in terms of careers thereafter, you would probably be more involved in trial conduct. So you would join trials units as data managers or trial managers, depending on your experience. But you wouldn't be able to apply for jobs as statisticians in clinical trial. So the focus is more on trial conduct. In the MSc Clinical Trials, the focus is much more on statistics in the Stats for clinical trials. Andy, do you have anything to add to the main difference between the two?
No, I don't know if you can hear me.
I can, yeah,
My
yeah, absolutely.
headphone just disconnected for some reason. No, really. I guess it's more driven by the students or yourself, where your interests lie, really, and it's something that I think both of us or Alex or someone from the MSc Clinical Trials would be very happy to sit down and talk to you about, really. Three of us, Hakim-Moulay and Alex, and you can sit together and discuss where you feel you're. But most of the modules and description of the modules are outlined online, aren't they? So you can look through the modules which you'll likely take in either, and I guess you can judge from those where your true interests lie. But I think typically people would come out to our course expecting to become a clinical trial statistician in possibly a clinical trials unit or something similar like a CRO or pharma. So if that is your aim or your interest, then I think our course is probably more suited to you. Whereas, as Hakim said, the MSc Clinical Trials is a bit broader, so you might become you might join another aspect of a clinical trials unit, such as being a clinical trial manager or something like that.
Great, of course, you're welcome. Any other questions? If there are no other questions, then thanks very much for joining the session. Here is another question. What does final project in term 3 consist of? So this is the master's thesis in term 3, and it's an independent piece of work supervised by the MSc supervisors, obviously, where you will write a thesis. It's going to be a small thesis, order of magnitude 20 to 30 pages of A4 in my experience. Andy, correct me if I'm wrong. And it's on a project that you will either suggest yourself, depending on your interest and what you've learned during terms 1 and 2, or that you will choose from a list of projects that we will provide you with at the beginning of term 2. So statisticians in the institute provide potential MSc projects. We log them in a list, and you have the choice, a choice to make between all of these projects, depending on your interest. Yes, the tuition fees, they are the same indeed. Because it's online, effectively, there is no difference between an international student and a UK student. A UK student could become international. They can decide to relocate. It wouldn't make a difference because the teaching would still be online, and therefore the fees are the same. Thank you, Alison, for posting the links. Obviously, Andy and I are available to discuss any further questions with you. You've got the email addresses on the website, and we would be more than happy to answer any questions. If you know students or colleagues of yours who might be interested in this MSc, we are running webinars monthly until June. So just recommend the webinar to them, and we will be very happy to have them at our next sessions. How many people are in the course? So this year we've got 14 students. It's a small course. How competitive is it? I think it's not necessarily the way I would look at it. What we want is to recruit students who have the potential to become trial statisticians, depending on their backgrounds. If we think that the background is good, we will offer places. Because it's online, we don't have the same sort of restrictions as a program in person. Our lecture hall, if you want, is as big as Zoom can handle. But in order to give a good teaching experience to the students, we are going to restrict, obviously, to maximum 20-25 per year, but we are not there yet. This would only be the second year of the course. The first year, as I said, we recruited 14 students, and we're hopeful to recruit up to 20 students this year. And as I said, there is no hard limit. It will depend on the background of the students and to what extent we think that they can become trial statistician depending on their backgrounds. The main entry requirement, prior education or work experience. I don't think it matters. Obviously, we want people with prior education. This is a master's, so you have to have a bachelor degree, at least. If you have another master's or if you have a PhD, that's also obviously acceptable. But if you demonstrate that it's via your work experience that you have a background in statistics, then, or at least something sufficiently quantitative that we think you can learn statistics over the course of 1 year, then yes, it can be used equally as education to justify your place on the masters. What do you think, Andy? Anything else to add about entry requirements or any other questions?
I think that's completely it, isn't it? It's done on it comes back to the competitive question as well. I mean, it's just done on a case-by-case basis, really. It's more about you and your background and your motivation, really. And as Hakim said, I think if you have done, I mean, typically I can't imagine you'd be here if you haven't done a course which didn't have a high level of medical kind of content and quantitative content as well. And so I think that would be acceptable. Or you've worked a little bit and now you're deciding to get a master's, in which case I think you're also almost highly likely to be suitable for this course because you've got that wider knowledge and experience of clinical trials in a real life setting. So I think it very much depends on you, but for the most part, I think if you're here, it's probably suitable for you. But don't hesitate to contact either of us, as Hakim said, by email. Our emails are readily available online on UCL, and so don't hesitate to contact either of us.
Excellent. Thanks very much, both of you, for joining the session, and best of luck. Get in touch if you have got any further questions, and otherwise have a good day.